Welcome to the National Railway Museum in Port Adelaide, South Australia. 2025 is a special year, marking the 200th anniversary of the opening of the world's first steam-hauled public railway on the 27th of September 1825, connecting places, people, communities and ideas, and ultimately transforming the world. Railway 200 is an international celebration to acknowledge 200 years of the birth of the modern railway. Born in Britain, rail transport quickly spread across the globe. As part of these celebrations, the National Railway Museum has put together this short presentation to highlight the many exhibits in its collection that were built in Britain as part of the global expansion of rail transport. The first exhibit encountered by visitors entering the museum consists of two pairs of steam locomotive driving wheels mounted on a length of track. Historically, this is the most important exhibit in the museum's collection, dating from 1856 and the start of steam railway operations in South Australia. The wheels belong to one of three locomotives built for the Adelaide and Port Railway by William Fairbairn and Sons in Manchester, England. Ordered by the famous Isambard Kingdom Brunel, consulting engineer for the new broad-gauge 5-foot 3-inch railway, they were built to the 240T wheel arrangement and arrived at Port Adelaide in November 1855. The locomotives were all withdrawn by 1874, but these driving wheels survived as part of a special flat wagon for moving narrow-gauge 3-foot 6-inch rolling stock around the state, nicknamed the Crocodile. Travelling crane number 2327. Travelling cranes were usually manually operated cranes which could be used for lifting light loads around goods yards. Number 2327 is one of two cranes built for the South Australian Railways by Cowan's Sheldon & Co. of Carlisle, England in 1881. Originally crane number 3, it was later renumbered 2327 circa 1903 and withdrawn in 1970. RX 93. The oldest locomotive in the museum is 460 RX 93, which was one of 6 R-class broad-gauge locos originally built for the South Australian Railways by Dubbs and Company of Glasgow in 1886. It was rebuilt as an RX class by the SAR in 1910 with the larger boiler that it carries today. Y97. Built for the expanding narrow gauge network in South Australia, the Y-class was the most numerous class of locomotive built for the SAR's 3-foot 6-inch gauge lines. 50 out of a total of 129 of these 260s being built by Bayer Peacock of Manchester. Y97 was one of those, arriving in Australia in 1890, and remarkably, it survived in service until 1970. Y12. Similar in design was Y12, which was built by Bayer Peacock in 1893, but for the privately owned Silverton Tramway in New South Wales. A21. The narrow-gauge tramway linked the mines at Broken Hill, New South Wales, to the South Australian Railways at the state border at Coburn. In 1915, when Silverton required more powerful locomotives, they again turned to Bayer Peacock to supply 4 larger 460s, the A-class, which included museum exhibit A21. Perron. Ore from the mines was processed at Port Pirie in South Australia at smelters owned by Broken Hill Associated Smelters, or BHAS. Perron was one of 4 060 tank engines built in 1918 by Andrew Barclay and Sons of Kilmarnock, Scotland, and used to shunt the BHA's sidings at Port Pirie. Accident crane number 3. Built in 1925 by Cowan Sheldon, number 3 was a 60-tonne lift steam crane used on the South Australian Railway broad-gauge network for accident recovery. Later converted from steam to diesel operation, it remained in service until 1995. 504. From the mid-1920s onwards, South Australian Railways Commissioner William A. Webb revitalised the rail network in the state. For the broad gauge, he ordered 30 new big power steam locomotives of 3 types from Armstrong Whitworth in England, all of which were delivered in 1926. Locomotive 504, named Sir Tom Bar Smith, was one of 10 482s, later modified as 484, intended to work heavy freight and passenger trains through the steep grades of the Adelaide Hills. It's the largest exhibit in the museum's collection and was the largest non-articulated type ever exported from Britain. 702. 702 was one of 10 282s built as part of the order for lighter mixed traffic duties. Another 10 were built by the SAR to the same design in 1928 and 29. E1. Due to its sparse population, electric traction has never been big in South Australia. However, the Broken Hill Proprietary Company chose the 600 volts DC overhead system for use on its quarry railway. Locomotive E1 came from a batch of 3 electric locos built in 1928 for BHP by Metropolitan Vickers Electrical Company Limited in England. These locomotives were 3-foot 6-inch gauge, weighed 25 tonnes and were used at the Iron Knob mine to transport iron ore to the crusher at Iron Monarch. 752. Between 1948 and 1951, 50 282 locomotives were built for the Victorian Railways by the North British Locomotive Company in Glasgow, Scotland, known as the N-Class. With the dawn of the diesel era, this was more than Victoria needed, and 10 were sold to the South Australian Railways, which was experiencing a severe locomotive shortage. Under SAR ownership, they were reclassified as the 750 class and given road numbers 750 to 759. Number 752 had been Victorian Railways number N477, with builder's number 26787 of 1950. It entered service with SAR on the 24th of February 1951 and was withdrawn in 1964. Ruston Shunter. This small broad-gauge 040 industrial locomotive is an example of a standard Ruston Hornsby design, used not only in the United Kingdom and Australia, but all over the world on various railway gauges. Before delivery to ICI Australia, this locomotive was selected by Ruston Hornsby for display at the 1951 Festival of Britain and was originally painted in a blue livery with yellow lining. It was used to shunt at the local soda ash plant in Osborne, South Australia. W25. The final steam locomotives purchased by the Silverton Tramway were another product of Bayer Peacock. 4 482s were delivered in 1951 to a similar design Bayer Peacock had provided to the Western Australia Government Railways, the W class. These Silverton locos had a relatively short working life, being replaced by diesel traction in 1960. NSU 61. Most diesel locomotives for Australian Railways were built in Australia under licence to overseas manufacturers. An exception was the Salzer-powered NSU class, built in 1954 and 1955 for the Commonwealth Railways by the Birmingham Railway Carriage and Wagon Company of Smethwick, England. 14 were built to replace steam traction on the remote narrow gauge Central Australia and North Australia railways. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. The National Railway Museum in Port Adelaide has many more exciting exhibits in its collection, showcasing rail travel in Australia. Our volunteer-run museum is open every day of the year except Christmas Day. So, if you're passing through Adelaide on your travels, be sure to come down and pay us a visit.